Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to our webinar, Microservices and Overview. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for joining the session. Hope you all are safe at home during these difficult times of COVID-19. Before we start the session, let me quickly introduce myself and my organization. I am Sarita Panigrahi, working as a tech lead at SDRC, that is Siddha Development Research and Consultancy. SDRC is a social enterprise incorporated in the year of 2010, committed to enabling social change initiatives by providing high quality, affordable, and customized solutions. The core functions of SDRC include research and advocacy, management systems, and capacity building. We use open society technologies to design paperless data flow systems that generate efficient and actionable insights. We work with government, UN organizations, and also civil society organizations. Today's session will be conducted by my colleague Azhar. Azhar is a technical architect in SDRC with extensive experience in developing microservices following domain-driven design concepts. He has been providing solutions to complex problem statements and is an excellent mentor. We will be recording this session for our future references and quality improvement assessment. Okay, let's start. Handing over to Azhar now. Azhar, am I audible? Okay.
Thank you, Sarita. Hello, guys. Welcome to this session. I would like to thank you all for joining this session. And our talk on microservices is going to be very interesting. I hope you will enjoy. Okay. So without wasting any time, let's jump into the topic.
Okay, just before jumping to the topic, let me tell everyone that if you have any questions during the webinar, kindly send a message in the chat box. We will pick up your questions in the Q&A round. Okay, let's get started.
Thank you. Okay, guys. So our talk on microservices. So as you guys know, the software industry has tried to solve many complex problems related to application development. Okay, and for years, this has made very much contributions to development of many database systems, architectures, development of many languages. Okay, so today our focus is on evolution of application development using architectures from monolithic to microservices. So let us look at the monolithic approach for web development. So previously, the traditional way to develop web applications was that we used to combine our code base into a single archive. Okay, and the deployment strategy was that we used to deploy it in an application server, and it is facing some front-end load balancer, and in the backend we have a database system. So generally users interact with the system by requesting our application through web browsers, and they send the request, and the requests are received through the load balancer, and this load balancer will forward our request to multiple instances of our application. Okay, and this application will receive the request and it will interact with our database. It will do some operations, and after doing operation, it will return the response to our client. Now here, looking deep into this architecture, you can see our code base. That is all our code basically, that is the presentation layer code, the code that will represent the UI, and the code that holds the business logic, and the code that accesses our database is coupled into a single code base, right? So there are three layers in our code. There's presentation layer, and there's a business layer code, and there is a data access layer code. Okay. So this is one of the things that we have seen here. Now, when our application load increases, we add instances of our application. That is, we deploy our application in another server, and we point this out in the load balancer that this is our new instance. If my new request that is coming to try to forward to this new instance. Okay. So by this way, we try to achieve the scaling of our application. But see here in the database section, since as you know, if I am using a SQL database, so SQL database, we cannot add multiple instances, even though we can add it. We can add replication, and there are certain issues with this replication mechanism. And we'll talk about this later section in Q&A if any one of you will ask about it. But I am skipping it right now. So basically, we have to do vertical scaling of SQL database. Okay, and the vertical scaling will cost us money. Obviously, our RAM and intensive CPU will be required to scale our database system. So here, at the development level, we have seen that there is a coupling of code at the application layer and our coupling of database schema, right? We'll drill down further. So what are the problems, or I would say not problems, but what are the challenges in this architecture? Okay. So the challenges increase whenever our application code size increases. That is, when our application grows bigger, it becomes huge, then problems try to emerge. Okay. So first challenge is the code and database schema becomes highly coupled. So if I am to introduce a change in the system, let's say I want to bring a change in customer service. So it might be impacting some other modules. Okay, so the team that is working on other modules, I have to communicate with them, whether I have to check out whether that may break their code. So since single code base is highly coupled with a single database schema, so this problem emerges. And due to this, a lot of coordination and communication is required if a single change is required in the system. So another challenge is if I bring a change into the system, I don't know what is the impact. What are the modules that will be getting impacted with this change? So I have to test the whole application. So our QA cycles become longer. And when QA cycles becomes longer, obviously, eventually our releases get slower. I cannot release my application frequently. Okay. Now, looking at the database itself, single type of database is not suitable for all kind of operations. You can see the RDBMS is a transaction system. It is built to process transaction and query, but searching, it will not be a right tool for implementing a highly scalable search engine, right? So here you can see a single database can bring up challenges. Another challenge is our IDE cannot handle large projects. If my project size is large, as you can see, if you are many of you here are developers, you might be experiencing this problem. When my code size application is bigger, So ID takes time to load the application. Running the application is slower. So all these challenges try to emerge. So finally, this leads to difficulty in development and testing. Okay. Now let us look at this scaling factor. See, uh, when I have to, let's say, my customer service, I have increased load in customer service. So I have to obviously scale my application. Now, uh, there is a basic minimum requirement of memory size for my application to run. So obviously, for only scaling a particular component, I have to deploy my whole application, right? With the application, I have a lot of configuration I have to also deploy, right? I have to management of configuration also increases. So these difficulties emerge. Now, what does microservice help us to overcome these challenges? Let's look at it. Here in this architecture, what we have done is we have decoupled the whole challenge. What was the coupling? The coupling was our code base and database, right? We have seen that whenever I bring a change in schema, it might impact other people. If I bring a change in code, it might also bring impact on my other people, right? So we separate this by decoupling the things. What I will do, I will break down my system. I will break my services, my modules into different services, and I will assign a team that you are responsible for managing this service, this code, and you are also responsible to manage its data. So I say that you will be managing a separate database. So if you change something, the schema, so it will not impact the people that are working some other service and managing some other database. So here we have got a highly decoupled system. Okay. Now, here we can see that my customer service is an individual application, the individual database. My order service here is an individual application with a database. I will maybe having many services with many databases. Okay. So I enforce another rule here that uh, an order service cannot directly change my customer service, or we can say it cannot directly talk to my customer database. Only if I want to enforce any change, let's say order service wants to make a change in customer database, so it can only do by calling or informing so to customer service. So this rule, if I enforce it, so only a change can be done by talking to its own service. This is another rule that is enforced here. Okay. As you can see, there is another benefit you can see. We have decoupled the presentation logic, that is the presentation code. Previously, it was bundled in the same archive. So we have separated this presentation code into a separate application. So it will talk to our services, individual services. Okay. So UI development is completely decoupled from the business development in terms of sharing of code base. Okay. So here, let's see closely this diagram. Here you can see the clients that a browser or a mobile device. Okay, so this browser is downloading a Angular application I can see here, and it is running this application in the browser. And this application is calling to something called a service gateway, API gateway, pardon me. And also the mobile device is requesting information to the API gateway. Now the API gateway here you can see is routing to all these services. Okay, and these services are talking to databases. And obviously they are returning some information, and after processing this information, the customer service is responding to the clients. So we learned here that we have decoupled the whole code base and database. Now, each service has a small code base, so small components, you can say them, are easy to develop, understand, and maintain. And also, it is easy to test. Now, independent components can be scaled easily. Tomorrow, let's say I have a customer search service or a product search service. I can scale it up if my searching is getting more requests. Okay. So I no need to communicate with other teams that I need scaling. Will it impact you in some way? So obviously not. So you can independently scale up things. So obviously introducing a single change, let's say I want to change something in my database. So only that team is responsible. So it doesn't need to talk to others about this. So introducing a single change is very easy. So release cycles become faster. I can release frequently. Okay. Now in this architecture, obviously there are some major challenges. So first one is communication with outside world. That is how the browser and the services will talk, the clients and services. How will the communication will happen? Because I have a lot of applications. Previously, I had a single backend application which browser was talking to or our clients were talking to. Now there are multiple individual services, how they will talk to each other. Second is how the service to service communicate. Let's say the customer service want to find out information about the orders. What are the orders I have made? So obviously they need to talk to each other to get the information. So how they will be talking to each other? Now obviously another challenge is this transaction management. So previously I had a single database. So as you know, the RDBMS system, let's say supports ACID, it is ACID compliant. So it supports something called atomicity. That is, I can update two individual tables within a single transaction. So it enforces that if something fails, both transactions or both inserts or updates will roll back. So this atomicity was guaranteed at RDBMS level. Obviously, if you are using NoSQL database, so you'll be designing your aggregates so that it will be handled in a single transaction if you know about NoSQL transaction management. So here another challenge is about the querying of data. So if you can see here, my information is scattered among different databases. So the customer information, the details of customer here in customer database, what the customer has ordered are here in the order database. Okay. So if I want to fetch information, what are my orders? So obviously I cannot query a single database. I have to pull information from both these databases. So both these services need to participate in this querying mechanism somehow, right? So this is another challenge. How, because since there's no single database, I cannot do join of tables. If you had in RDMS a single customer table and an order table, you could simply do a SQL join and fetch the information, right? So here, this is another challenge, querying of data. So we learned that there are four major challenges. Communication with outside world. Let's see how this challenge is handled in the microservice environment. Okay. So one of the options is that whenever my client needs to talk with different services, it should know the services IP address, the location where they are deployed, right? So it can call them directly. So as you know, since I said that we'll be scaling this, that if I will have 100 instances of customer service. So how my client will get information about these services, their IP locations. So this is a very challenging thing, right? So what we brought in a new thing called as API gateway. So gateway, it will route this information. It is just a gatekeeper. It is acting like a gatekeeper between the client and services. Okay. So the client will simply understand where is API gateway. It need not know where the services are. So it will simply request the API gateway. Now it is the responsibility of this API gateway to route the request to different services. Okay. So how it does so? So one of the things we can say that, okay, my API gateway has information of all these services. So let's say it has a routing map. Okay. So here we have a service and we have a path that is /order and the IP addresses of order services. And here we have another service that is its path is /inventory and IP address are this. So basically we are using something called pattern matching. So whenever the client will request something, obviously it will, if it is doing a REST call, so the REST call has a URL. So in the URL, we have paths, right? So as you know, there is a protocol information, there is a domain information, there is port, and there is URI. Okay. So let's say the URI part, in the end part, I had /order/API/v2/something. So the API gateway is smart enough to identify from the path that is order to route this request to order service. So how it does so? It does by using this pattern. So it will check if the URL has this /order. So it will understand that I have to route this request to my order service. So we have hard coded this IP addresses here. So we said that, okay, we will centralize the configuration. We will have all the configuration in the API gateway. So we have hard coded all the IP address. Okay. Again, as I have said, if I scale how you handle, so this is again a challenging stuff. Let's understand this. So let's say we have hard coded this information. We have 2 to 3 services only. We don't have 100. So we have hard coded this information. So by this pattern match, the API gateway routes this request to multiple services. Okay. Okay, if anyone has any question, I'm pausing. If you have any questions, you can ask. Okay.
Okay, we have a question from Ashish.
Okay.
Ashish, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Hello, Ashish. Is it good practice to join both schema? Ashish has this question.
Can you be a little clear? I could not understand this question. Okay. Any difference SOA and microservices? Okay. I could read the question, Sarita.
Okay.
I think Narsimham K has asked this question, if there is any difference between SOA and microservice. Okay. You can say that there are obviously differences and there are some same concepts also. So like you can say the name itself, service oriented architecture. So here we are separating our modules into different services, right? But microservices is also the same, separating our services, But here we are building more fine-grained services. Okay, let's say you can have a service for a simple implementing a single query. Okay, you can have a single microservice for a search. So this is microservice. Obviously, there is a challenge. There is, you can say in the market, there is a debate between what is microservice. Is it different from SOA or not? So this is a hectic topic. I don't want to go into that. Obviously, in SOA, we have it is about integration of multiple applications in the enterprise. So basically we are using something called as ESB, which acts as a gateway for communication between multiple services, right? Uh, uh, so we can say that, but in microservices, you can have a direct point-to-point communication using REST, gRPC. There are many. Okay, so SOA encourages reuse of code, or you can say schema database. You can have multiple services having a single database, services talking to a single database. Obviously, in microservice also you can have, depends upon what are the patterns you are following, right? So the basic difference is about the size of the service and the communication style, I would say. That's my understanding. Uh, what is server side load balancing, client side load balancing in microservices? Okay, so what is server side load balancing?
Okay, Azhar, can we pick up these questions in the Q&A round?
Yeah. I would think we can pick up these questions in Q&A. That will be very good.
Okay. We have noted all the questions.
Yeah. Okay, folks, let's continue. We'll take your questions at the end. So we're talking about communication between services. So let's say if customer service will try to communicate with order service. So what are the options of communication? So here, let's say if customer wants to fetch all the orders, and let's say another use case is the customer service wants to inform order service that the customer details have been changed. Okay, so there are two modes of communication here. First of all is direct point-to-point communication over HTTP, and there is indirect asynchronous communication through a medium. Okay, so let's look at direct point-to-point communication. So here in the direct P2P, as you have seen in the API gateway section, we had this routing map that API gateway was using to route this. Similarly, we can say that the order service also have this routing information. So we can hard code or inform each of the services to have this information, and they use this pattern match or something to find out the IP address of other service. So here you can say that let's say a request goes from the browser to fetch the details of the order. Okay, and the quantities of the order, and what are the inventories available for that, let's say, item. If so, this order service needs to talk with inventory service. So how it will talk? It will need this IP addresses. So this is one of the mechanisms. But obviously, as we have said, that this is not a right way of doing things. Okay, if you have 2 to 3 service, it's fine. But if you are expecting that your load will eventually increase, so this is not the right way to design. So what is the approach you can take is, you can have something called service registry. So you can introduce something called a service registry into the system. So what we are saying that whenever any of the service starts up, it will immediately inform the service registry that this is my IP address and this is my name. So basically every service will have its own name. Okay, we say that order service has a name, inventory service has a name. So every service has a name. So whenever they start up, during startup, they will communicate with service registry and they will inform their name and they will register their IP address. And the service registry obviously is a register of all the services. So it has the responsibility to manage the IP address of all these services. So if any of the service goes down, let's say one of the instance of order service goes down. So if orders the service registry doesn't have this information, so any of the service that is requesting the IP of order service, so the service registry will give the stale IP to the requesting service. So obviously that will fail because the service is down. So the service registry needs to be smart enough. So what service registry says that, okay, you have registered yourself, you send a heartbeat signal every every frequent interval so that I know you are alive. So what this services do, they send this heartbeat at particular interval. So the service registry knows that, okay, this is active. So if it fails to do so, the service registry discards the IP address of that service. Okay, so we have understood the service registry. Now we have another communication mechanism is indirect communication. It is service bus. Okay, so many people were asking about SOA. So the SOA uses something called ESB for asynchronous communications. So the ESB is a very heavyweight thing, but here we can use event bus. That is simply, it can be a messaging platform or a publish subscribe thing, okay, like Apache Kafka or RabbitMQ. So here the order service, whenever it tries to inform something about inventory service, so it will publish an event into the event bus, and the event bus will be storing all these events in its log. So the inventory service will listen to this event and process that event. Process means it can update a database or it can query some other service to fetch information and update the database. So it depends upon the use case. So this is the indirect communication mechanism. Now we are talking about distributed transaction. So previously we had a single database. Obviously we can do transaction atomically. The RDB supports this. If you are using NoSQL, so you manage your handle your design your schema as such that it will be committed in a single atomic transaction. So here in the microservice environment, we have different services. So some of the transactions require spanning of transactions. Let's say I have an e-commerce website and I'm ordering something. So obviously this goes through many services. I have to make payment. I have to go to the order service to update the information. That is the status of order. I have the inventory service, which will deduct the status of my stocks. And I have the dispatch service, which will dispatch my items and trace the status of my dispatch. So obviously the transaction is not completed, an order is not completed until it is cancelled or it is received, right? So I cannot complete this transaction atomically in a single commit because it is a long running transaction, right? So here this type of patterns transactions are handled using a pattern called a Saga pattern. Now in the Saga pattern, there are two types of patterns, that is your execution coordinator pattern and a choreography pattern. So let's take a look into this. Here in the execution coordinate pattern, I have a separate controller. I can say this is my controller and this is my Saga. So this Saga or this controller is responsible for managing this transaction. So let's take a look. If my order service request this Saga that a order has been received, you process this order. So what will happen is the Saga will initiate the process of transaction. So it will request the payment service to debit the amount. So the amount will be debited, or this request will be processed by payment service, and the amount will be debited, and the payment service will inform the Saga that the amount has been successfully debited. And the Saga or the controller will receive this message, and obviously it is a success message, so it will start processing further. So it will request the inventory service to update the inventory, and the inventory service will take a look at its own database and see if everything is okay, the stock is available. So it will update the DB and it will inform the Saga that inventory has been successfully updated. Now obviously the controller will see that this is a success message. Obviously the processing has been completed at the inventory service level. So it will call the dispatch service to start the process of dispatching these items. And the dispatch service will take the request of dispatch and it will start all the processing. And finally, when the person delivers this item into this your house, so it will do a success. Whenever it hits the success, the Saga or the dispatcher service will publish an event of order dispatched. So the Saga will receive this request of dispatch successfully. So it will inform the order service that the order has been completed successfully, and the order service will update its database with a status of completed. So this is how this controller, the Saga controller or the executor, handles this whole complex transaction. So what are the benefits in this pattern? This pattern provides centralized control of logic. So you can see the whole business flow, the logic, the business logic in a centralized code base. So it is easy to manage, and you can easily see each and every order, where what is the status, where it is, and you can easily query information. I can debug easily. So all these things you can do. But what are the demerits? The simple demerit is you have to deploy another service. Now, let's see the choreography pattern. So let's see if something goes wrong in between the transaction, the order transaction that is happening here. Let's say the inventory was not available. Let's say I have received concurrent request for a mobile device. Okay. Now, while updating the inventory, it was found that no more devices are available right now. So the amount has been debited from the account. Okay. So obviously I have to refund this amount. Okay. So the rollback is not possible in this case, right? Because the transaction has been completed, the database has been committed with the information that this is the order ID, this is the amount, these were the items, all this information is committed into the DB. There is no rollback. So what I can say is I will fire a compensating transaction. So this compensating transaction will compensate the previously committed transaction. So here, let's see the flow. The controller will receive the request of create order. It will start the debit amount debited. Then it will start update inventory. Now here, suddenly it was found that item was not available. So the inventory service will fire a message that update inventory failed. So the controller will receive this message and understand that there was no items. Obviously, it has to start the processing of refunding. So it has to communicate with this payment service to credit the amount. and the payment service will say that amount has been credited. So this is the rollback procedure in the Saga controller mechanism. So another mechanism we have is choreography. So here there is no centralized controller. So everything happens with events. So services listen to each other for events, and whenever a certain event is received, they try to act on that event. Let's say it's a chain reaction. Okay, so if we have 5 people, so I will process the request and say I have processed. So someone between us will be listening to my message and they will start reacting. So this procedure happens that they communicate to something called as an event bus, and the event bus here is the medium through which these services communicate. So the order service here notifies that a order has been placed. So let's say the payment service here is listening to this event, and it will listen to this event and it will start the firing of processing of payment, and it completes the processing. Then the inventory service is listening to the event fired by payment service. So it will start the processing of updating its own DB, and after this it publishes the event that I have updated my inventory to the event bus, and the event bus receives this event. The dispatcher service is listening to inventory update event, and it will try to act on it. And finally, the item is dispatched, and the item dispatch event is listened by order service. This order service listens this and updates the status of order to success. Now, if something fails in between in this, so how it is happening? Let's say here the order is placed and the payment service receives this, and processing of payment failed. So this obviously the payment is failed, and the order service listens to this event, so it will update its own database. So here the challenge is that you cannot trace the event flow. Okay. Another challenge is you cannot easily see the whole processing. If this is very, I have shown this with a very simple uh, workflow, but this is not that simple. It can have more services and it can become a spider web. So it will become very messy to understand, and coordination between multiple events and which event is fired and what should it react. So all these are required in the this pattern. And one of the benefits is tomorrow a new service can come and start listening to events. I no need to change my code because all are asynchronous. They don't know about others. They know what I consume and what I release. So it is very easy to attach a new service into this workflow. So this thing allows us very loose coupling in the way that you can add listeners to our events. Now, we are talking about the fourth challenge that brings here is querying in microservice. Now we talk that we have discrete services, and each service is responsible for managing its own database. This is a strict rule that we have been following. We are saying that we'll follow a database per service pattern. So now whenever I need a query, let's say my query is find order details of order ID 1. So I want to know all this information. So this is a slight mistake here. This ID is 1. Here we are representing 135. Pardon us. So here this order ID, and I'm saying this is my payment status and what are the items and what is the status, whether it is dispatched or not. So all this information I have to collect from different databases, right? what is the status of my order, whether it is paid or not, what are the items and what is the location, and whether it is dispatched. This is this very simple overview. I can have very detailed information, right? So obviously, all these services need to uh, come in collaboration to somehow give the final output, right? So here we are saying that, okay, we will have a service that will be responsible for querying all the services and fetching the information and doing a in-memory join, like a SQL join we used to make, right? So here this service is responsible for joining this information and it will be replying to the client. Okay, so this pattern is called API composition pattern. So we have composed all this discrete information at a single place and returned. Now, this pattern is very useful in microservices and it is used frequently for querying the microservices databases. You can deploy if you have a very huge requirement of you have very high load on this query, let's say, so you can scale this service itself so that it can handle this individual query. Now, obviously, let's say if I want to fetch I want to fetch bulk information. I want to fetch all the orders and the status. Let's say not all the orders. Let's say I want to fetch 15 days orders. What are the status? Whether they are dispatched or not. Okay, if failed, what were the reasons? All this detailed view I want, right? So how can I get this? So here comes another pattern called CQRS pattern. So here I will say that, okay, the order service will have two databases. One database will have the latest state of records, that is previously my order was pending, then it got let's say payment completed, then in transit, then completed. So always this one of the database will have always the state, that is latest state of my order. Okay, so I am not keeping the whole history. Now in the query side, there is another DB where I will denormalize all the data. Okay, so whatever my requirements were, like I said that I want to find out all the details of this, whether that uh, order was completed or not, and what were the reasons, what was the location, all this information, detailed information. So I will be having in this database. So how can I do that? So I will do something called, I will separate my commands and queries. Uh, Commands means I am doing something, let's say I'm doing post operation or a put or delete operation, uh, or the client will simply querying data. So I will divide these two database. For these two database, I will have two separate services. So all the commands will go to the command service, and here the command service will update the database and publish this domain event into the event bus in a single atomic transaction. Okay, so it should be done in a single atomic transaction. It is very important. Now here the another event handler will be there that will listen to this event and it will update the view. So it can be a denormalizer, that is it will denormalize all the data, that is it will query the customer service maybe, and it will fetch the information from customer service and will have details of customer and order. Here you can also have an aggregator that will react to this event and aggregate. Let's say if there is a query, how many orders of this device from this district had happened. So your aggregator will simply react to this event and aggregate the data and will update this into the order DB. Oh, you can have a data warehouse, but we're not going there. So we are saying about something real time. Okay. So here we have this updated information that we can simply throw into our UI. Now, the challenging part is, okay, we are saying we will denormalize, we will react to this event immediately, and we will fetch and denormalize and update our view, that is our tables, so that it can be retrieved with a single select query. Okay. So tomorrow, if a new type of view is required, how do we build it? So this is very a challenging question. So how to build a view that is very new, because this is a new requirement right now. So I don't have all these events, the past events, right? So building a new type of view is very challenging with this. So we will introduce something new pattern called event sourcing. So what we will say that, okay, my command service will, instead of updating the order DB, so I will have a centralized event store. That is, I will have a centralized event storing database. Instead of storing the state, that is, I said the order, what is the status of order? I'm updating every time, right? The status. So instead of storing the latest state, I will store the events, right? I will store the transaction trial or event trial, I can say that. So I will store all the state that previously it was pending, then it got payment completed, then it got in transit, then it got, let's say, order failed. So what I'm saying is, I have this trial of events, and when this event happened, so I have all this information, and I will store the information in a database that is called as event store. Okay. So all the services that are on the command side will publish these events into the event store. Okay. And this event store will have this all the information, that is, what is the aggregate, or you can say the domain, or what is the service. To ease you out, if you guys are very much new to microservices, then basically we'll store the entity and the type of aggregate and the ID, the sequence ID. What is the sequence of this event, right? So the events will be sequenced. This is number one, this is number two, this is number three. So all these events, the timestamp and the data, that is the event that should have updated my database, right? So I will have this event data. So if I have this event data, so whenever I have to get my latest state, I will replay these events. Let's say for a customer one, I will fire and fetch all the events of customer one for this order, this one. Okay, and I will replay those events and build the latest state. So by that way, I will get the latest domain. So here we are not storing the data, we are storing the events. That is a simple change here. So what this gives us benefit here is, tomorrow if I want to build a new type of view, so I can simply replay this event and build a new view. So this event store will be my persistent event store, and this will be holding my whole state of application, right? So the whole application information is nothing but chain of events, right? Obviously, everything in my application is a chain of events. So you can say that it's like a bank ledger. So you record the transactions. Okay. So what is the balance? You calculate by doing a all replaying, that is operating on those information, and finally you get the latest value. Same in the whenever in transaction happens, simply in the banking domain we insert data, we do not update data, right? So we calculate the latest value or the balance by replaying all those events. Okay, so this ends our uh, view on microservices. Obviously, this is not the end of all. We have simply scratched the surface. There is more to it. Then we have here for questions. We are open for questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Azhar. Okay, so now we will start our question and answer round. So I will give you the access to unmute yourself so that you can go ahead and ask your question. So that will be done one by one. So let us start first with Seema Prajapati. Seema, I have unmuted you
Hello.
with your
Hello.
question.
Hello. Are you able to hear me? Hello.
Yes, yes.
Uh, so my question is this: that how load balancer will come to know that where the where the request of the client will go? I mean, which service the request will go first, and moreover, um, what will be the API gateway do here? I mean, how the interaction will be happening of the API gateway as well as the load balancing. So can you just like clear both of these terms?
Okay, thank you for your question. So, okay, here the client requests the API gateway. Okay, so here the API gateway will simply check the URL of the request. Okay, what is the URL? And it will try to find out the pattern that were defined in the route map. Okay, so we have said that this slash order path will have these IP addresses. Okay, that is where are the locations of order service. So here the API gateway has this information. Okay, so whenever the client requests a particular request to order service, the API gateway is intelligent enough to detect that okay, this request has a path of slash order. Okay, so let's say in the front you have http flipkart.com slash order slash API v2 and something. Okay, so the API gateway will is smart enough to see that okay, this URL has a order in it. Okay, so it has a pattern, right? Path, that is order. So it will identify okay, this request needs to be forwarded to order service. So what it will do, it is having a list of IP addresses, right? So it has a list of IP addresses, and this IP addresses, it knows each and every instance has a separate IP. So there will be, let's say, 100 of instances. So what it will do, it will load balance it. How it will load balance it? Uh, it will use a round robin algorithm. Okay, so first of all, first request whenever happens, let's say no requests are there. Client is requesting first, client recording first request to order service. So what will happen? The API gateway will pick up the first IP and it will forward the request to order service. If client 2 or same client request a second request to this again order service, so it will do what is called as will pick up the second IP address. So by this way, it does load balancing. That is, my request to first request goes to one of the instance, second request goes to another instance. Likewise, third request will go to third instance. Okay, now even you can customize this algorithm. If you don't want round robin, you can have your own algorithm of your choice. Basically, this API gateway is a server. Okay, this is a server. So this server is handling all this information. Okay, so this is a server basically. So here in the API gateway, you can have Nginx. If you have used Nginx, you can use it as an API gateway. It has pattern match system. Even you can use Apache server as API gateway. It has modules to handle this. Okay. Obviously, this using that will be very static. You have to hard code these IP addresses. Okay. But there are some specialized servers to handle this, or you can use a cloud-based platform like Kong. You have something Kong gateway, or if you are looking for open source in Java platform, you have something called as Joule API gateway. And Spring also has something called Spring Cloud Gateway, but the Joule gateway is very famous in open source world. And you also will be having for different platforms, but I don't have idea about those. So are you clear? Hello.
Okay, Seema, you can unmute yourself. I have given you the access. Hello. Okay, let's go to the next question. That is from Ashish. Ashish has the question, in SQL, we can join two schemas. Suppose here we have customer DB as well as order DB. So we can perform join between these schemas to get the info. So is it a good practice?
In microservice world, see, we have different schema, we have a different database itself. Okay, so yeah, okay, you want to join the schema.
Okay,
What I understand is
Azhar,
that,
before jumping into the answer, Ashish, are you able to unmute yourself? You would be seeing a option. Okay, okay, you are able to unmute.
okay, you can ask your question directly
Okay.
so that I can get a better view of it.
Hi, Ajay. As we have seen that we have a two databases like or a service per databases like order and inventory or customer. But in a SQL world, when we have a three databases of per services, like order is having its own database, customer is having own database, and inventory is having its own database, and that is also a SQL. So I can perform a join between these two databases using schema join. So is it a good practice to get an information?
Okay, okay, yeah, I understand that. There is something called a DB link in Postgres. You can query multiple databases, and I hope there are other databases to support this. But obviously, see, we are looking for scalability, right? And the second thing is loose coupling. So if you are doing that, so you are breaking the principle of loose coupling, right? See, in the monolith, we had this very tightly coupled system because every team was dependent on the schema. So when you are doing this query, so you are accessing the other guy's DB. So if he tries to change the columns of DB, so your queries will tend to what? Will fail, right? So this is not a good approach. So we should forbid that. We only should access through the services. We'll contact the service to get the information or change the information. That is the rule.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ashish. So the next question is from Devashish. Can you please give some information about security endpoints? And for securing my data from endpoint, I have to choose JWT or session. Which one will be better? Okay, Devashish, can you unmute yourself? Okay, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi, Ajay.
Hi.
In fact, I'm into the development of a system which is having the requirement of n number of endpoints. All these endpoints are stateless. And in fact, I have gone for using JWT, if you know, as just an web toolkit. And there is also I have provided session. Means for each request, the client is sending the session ID and or you can say the cookie. That is one option. Another option is I'm sending the JWT also with the help of string batch security or string security. String security is generating the JWT and for each request I'm sending it. So which practice will be better or both I should keep? That's my question.
Okay, so here we have a question that whether we'll be using session-based strategy or JWT. So basically, now here comes there are two important things to note about stateless applications. So in the stateless application, we want that if my application restarts, the user should not lose its session, right? So there are two options that I I have to persist my session information into some kind of database or file system, right? So, so basically, I should not use in-memory based session. I should store my session in some persistent storage, so that if my service recovers, so my state of the user in DB is in DB. So their automatic no logout will happen for the user. So it will give a very good experience to the user. Okay. Now, whenever you are saying you want to store the state, so you are required to have a storage, right? So either you will be using Redis for scaling or a database like Postgre or MySQL, or you can store by serializing your objects into your hard drives. So this is one of the impacts of having your SOSIN. That is, you need an external storage device. With JWT, this thing goes away. That is, the storing of sessions in a persistent device is no more required, because we are encrypting the session information in the token itself, and we are sending to our clients. And the client is responsible to send the session information each time it is sending the request. And it is the responsibility of the server to authenticate or verify the token whether it is valid or not. So here comes whether I should use both or not. So it depends on your use case. And the question is, why do you want to use both? So if you are using browser-based clients, so yes, session is a very good, I say it's a very good protocol. You can use it, but using two of them is also valid if you are using mobile clients. That is, you can use JWT for them. But you have to understand that you have to handle different types of clients. You have to let's say handle the cross request forgery. That is, in the session, the user you have updating some information, and your session is getting updated. But if the user using a mobile device and you are using JWT, so there the session information will be different, right? So this issue you have to handle. So it brings a new challenge into the system. So that's what I have to say. If you can handle those, having those on mind, then there is no issue having two of them. But I should suggest that you should have one. Thank you. I'm completed.
I should keep or I'll remove session part.
Pardon me, can you be more louder?
Yeah, should I remove the session tracking or I should keep it?
See, I have given you reasons that if if you are using session and you are updating some information, so that updated information is in the session, but how that information will be updated in JWT token, because it is on client side. So either you have to force logout or expire that token, which you cannot do. You again have to have a notification system to push that notification to delete that token in the client or browser or any other device that the user is using with the JWT based system. So this brings a challenge. If in the microservice environment, you should prefer using OAuth or JWT, depending upon your requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Devashish. Moving on to the next question. The next question is how microservices communicate with each other. Naveen and Narasimha has asked this.
Okay, we had talked that they can directly communicate. Okay, let me go to. Okay. The services can communicate directly. So directly means they can use HTTP, gRPC. Okay, so the order service can directly send a HTTP request to the inventory service. For doing so, they need the IP address. Okay, so this IP address of inventory service they can get from the something called as service registry, because all the services during startup have registered themselves, so they can get the IP address of this service. Here you can see the flow, that is the order service is trying to communicate with inventory service. So during startup, this order service has registered into the service registry. Also the inventory service has registered itself. So the order service will query the service registry to give the IP of inventory service. Okay. So upon receiving the IP, it can directly send a GET request to the inventory service and get the results. This is how they can communicate. This is direct communication, that is through HTTP. Okay. Here there is another method called asynchronous. Here you will have a middleware. Let's say you can have Apache Kafka or RabbitMQ or a simple messaging infrastructure. Okay, any of the pops up mechanism that handles or messaging you can have, and you can simply send the message, and this message will be listened by this service. Okay, so you can have a topic. In case of Apache Kafka, you write that message to the topic, and this service will be listening to that topic, so it will get that information. And this is asynchronous. Basically, this is this indirect communication is used to notify something. Okay, it is not used for immediate response. So if you want immediate response, you should go for direct. So in the microservice system, you can use both. Okay, depending on the use case, you can have both, or even you can have any one of them. So depends. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, moving on to the next. Seema Prajapati wants to know which saga pattern is better, either choreography or orchestration.
Okay. So again, see, you can use a mixture. I will say use a mixture that is best. That is here. Here you can have in this position, you can have a event bus. Okay. Direct the okay. Which one is better depends on your use case, how you want it. it is often your decision to take it. If you have very complex business logic and you want to see have a centralized control, then obviously you go for a controller pattern. And the Flipkart uses this for the transaction mechanism, the controller pattern. Okay, uh, but they are also using this controller with the event. So how they do it, that is, if this Saga will publish this debit amount event into the message bus or event bus. So the payment service will receive that and process it, and it will publish to the event bus. Okay, and the Saga will be listening to this event in the event bus. So that is another way. So you can have a mixture of both, and we have not covered that. Uh, uh, so it depends on your use case, because if you have this, it, tomorrow if you want machine learning algorithm or something, you can simply attach your service and listen to this events. So what you can do reporting. You can have you can send this data to your data warehouse for reporting or real-time tracking, fraud detection. All this you can do this. Okay, so the choice is yours. What type of system you are building and what are the requirements? I hope that answers your question.
Sir, can you just tell any real-time example of both the pattern, if you know? Any real-time example?
Okay, this is the real-time example in Flipkart. Okay, here this is real time. The Flipkart uses this type of pattern to solve the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for now. If there are any questions, then you can send us to this mail ID. I am sharing it in the chat box. Okay, thank you, Azhar, for the neat presentation, and thank you everyone for your participation to make this session interactive. I have shared a link in the chat box where you can provide your valuable feedback. This would help us to make the future sessions more interesting. Okay, stay tuned for our upcoming webinars. Thank you very much.